Hello everyone, it is Mike Levin. Wednesday, August 2nd, and I thought I'd take the stairs down this morning just to start my plan to mix it up a bit. One of the advantages of living here in Inwood, New York City, tippy top of Manhattan, is that you've got a variety of ways you can get into work. It's really awesome. You can take the one, which is at the bottom of these 215 steps right here, and it's really easy to get to because you're going down the steps, and then you may or you may not get a seat because it's coming from the Bronx. You can also take the A, which is at the end of walking through this beautiful park, Isham Park, right here, and you're always guaranteed a street, you're always guaranteed a seat, and it's express, so double bonus. And that usually is the route I take in the morning, and I've decided in order to mix it up a bit, I would take the third route for getting into the city, which is the Metro North. And I usually only do this when I'm in a rush to get somewhere in, say, Upper Midtown from Inwood, because it lets you off at Grand Central at around, I guess, 42nd Street, but really far on the west side around Park Avenue and Madison Avenue. And I work on Madison. However, then it's a long shot down to get to the office, which you can take some of the lines that are there as well. I believe it's the 6, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, 3 routes from Inwood: the end of the line of the A, where you always get a seat in the morning; the 1, which is coming over from the Bronx, which is a local, making a lot of stops, but still makes pretty good time compared to the A, especially if you're not getting off at one of the express stops downtown. So there's this whole great big region of like 23rd Street that just isn't covered by the A. The A skips right over from Penn Station down to I believe 14th Street. So you either have to walk north or walk south pretty far. So when I take the A in the morning, I get off at Penn Station, and so I have a few blocks south still to walk, and quite a few of those long blocks, those annoying crosstown blocks west, in order to walk to get to work. So there's no perfect commute for the Lower West Side from Inwood. So that'll be getting fixed when I move to Staten Island, where I'll be able to take either the express bus or the ferry. And it's nice having these options. I like living a place where there's 2 or 3 options of how to get somewhere, and that's just by public transportation, not to mention I actually have a car as well, which is one of those great privileges you can only do in certain areas of Manhattan, including up here in Inwood. It's just this side of doable, but I'll certainly be glad to be giving up a garage space in favor of easy street parking, or a garage, even a driveway is a possibility with a new place in Staten Island, which is where I'll be, I expect, in a few months after I close on my place. If any of these buyers do turn out to be real, I'm deciding to make the move now, perhaps a bit earlier than I can, that I'm in the position to do, in order to get closer to Addie every day. She's only going to be at this 6.5, 7-year-old age once, and it's highly impressionable, and I'm doing a great job on the phone every night, and those phone calls sometimes last a couple of hours. Last night's, I think, was only about 40 minutes or so, but it's going to be nicer to do that when I'm close by and in person, and that can become, why don't you just stay over and I'll drop you off in the morning, I'll get you to sleep. One of the advantages of homeschooling is if you don't have something scheduled the next day, you're not on a strict schedule. And based on the new economies that are evolving, where people really can, set their own working conditions if they can deliver something other people want and need, and really don't care how you get it done or where you get it done. So having that flexibility of control of your own life is an important future trend that I'm trying to lead Addie towards, and I think homeschooling is nicely aligned to that. So I wholeheartedly support it, and I'm only just trying to layer on those things that will probably be easier for me to do, like making sure math isn't math in her head when she gets up to, algebra, for example. I want to really excite her about it in ways that I never was in school. I think it's very possible. I think that when you connect, that's the one going by. I think when you connect all these abstract notions of algebra and mathematics and calculus with the real world, how, the universe has a speed limit, the speed of light. It has a resolution, a fuzzy boundary, Planck's constant. It gets really interesting in, how everything is just these mental models, like Einstein would do the thought experiments. And that's all, our perception and interaction with the world is, all this sensory stuff layered up on top of these evolved mobility robot devices that are given about 100 years on Earth if you're lucky, and perpetuate themselves, but not in a pure fashion, in this about 50-50 mixing it up with genes from the gene pool fashion that keeps re-rolling those dice. And when you layer on survival of the fittest, hate to use that misnomer, but evolution has a kind of nasty edge to it that says you are either the energy being consumed by higher, more complex forms of matter, or you are that higher, more complex form of matter. And while there are balances and predator and prey can live in a certain proportion, and things like the population and logistics curve keep everything at this nice stability. Those stabilities are not to be assumed. When you have a stable system, you have a fluke. You have something that went into a nicely oscillating between two extremes with something just this side of being able to pull it back to swing in the other direction. And it's in those oscillations, those, the experience being had by the single instances of states of matter and creature and life that get to exist longer than they otherwise could and evolve into higher, more complex forms, because that oscillation creates the space and place and context in which they can do that, accumulate experiences, being a long-running instance. And so scientists and philosophers and everyone around the world is coming to similar conclusions, that if we can pinpoint these things so precisely, like the speed of light and Planck's constant, does it not follow that we'll figure most of it out, at least to the level of being able to hack reality to the maximum extent it can be hacked? And in those types of systems, you usually need some type of memory, some type of, encode and store your impressions of experiences you've had. And there, I probably missed the 8:15, I'm not sure. I'll probably end up being on the 8:30 Marble Hill Metro North. Let's see if I can get that right. There's the stairs going down. And, I like to not be in a rush. If I get the 8:30, I'll be in Grand Central by 9. I'll be at the office well before 9:30, especially if I take the train. So I'm in a pretty good place. I like to not feel rushed. because I'm trying to bring these thoughts, of course, full circle. So you've got these, interesting instances of longish running matter, in other words, us, single individuals, in the 100-year time range, and cultures and societies, and even evolutionary branches getting their chance, are measured in the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of years. And they're, fairly reliable, predictable, recurring cycles within an oscillating system that's within another larger oscillating system, because we're all, in a solar system with a sun in the middle, which is, in an outer spiral arm of the Milky Way galaxy, which is sharing space with other galaxies. So there's lots of these stable, twirling, rotating, oscillating systems, of which we are, a member of one at the human life scale. And you got lots of choices. As you go, you can choose choice A or B or C. I can take the 1, the A, or the Metro North. Every once in a while, you just change it up for whatever reason. I'm doing it this morning to make this video more interesting. So Metro North it is. Not in a hurry. I still might see the 8:15 go past me. I have that time more or less. It might be 8:14, 8:16. But at any rate, it's about every 15 minutes at rush hour in the morning. So you really want to time it right if you're in a hurry. I like not being in that much of a hurry. I'm in a type of job where I'm doing coding. Oh, and I'm making my choices. So in this world of scheduling and getting reliable events and jobs to trigger daily, at least daily, maybe hourly, you can be all old school and throw a bash script into a cron directory under the generally Debian /etc/cron.daily, cron.hourly directories, so that you don't have to deal with a cron table and cryptic API and having to edit text files. So as an old school kind of believer, I'm not really old school, it's not like I was a sysadmin in a prior life or anything, but generally being old school, I temporary limited service, continue, that's fine. One way, Marble Hill to Grand Central, peak, one adult, and oh yeah, go to next screen, add which options, none, ticket rail only. I'll do ticket rail only. My debit card. I'm sure there's some way for people watching this to hack me, even though I'm pointing the phone away. But reflections and stuff, you got to be careful of that. You got to think about that stuff. Do I want a receipt? No receipt necessary. One ticket being printed. So I don't do this too often. It's $9. I don't really have to spend, but who cares? There's another train coming through, but I don't think it stopped. Who really cares? Life is short. Experiences are more valuable than money. Some people love to travel. I've got a friend whose name is I Live to Travel on Instagram. I couldn't be of a more distant belief, but I have equally high respect for him and me and my worldview. I'm a cozy, stay-at-home type person. And having the option of working from home and delivering outstanding work appeals to me. It's the vision, it's the dream, it's what I'd like to accomplish as a means of surviving in that not always nice system that is, evolution, competition. It's a intense driving force that you can't always get away from, no matter how much you want to be on that other side of that discussion. So I had to automate a task, keep it reliable, keep it running, and I'm basically living off one old school server, one instance of an old school server in the Amazon cloud called the Elastic Computing Cloud, or EC2. So under Amazon Web Services, AWS, there's a ton of different services, pure storage and a key value pair way, like the NoSQL craze that's going on, and that's the S3 data bucket. They got so many other systems like Lambda for real-time fast calculations and number crunching that is so often called for now under machine learning models. And so my choices, different ways to tackle problems. There's the big ways that scale, and then there's the little ways that scale horizontally because you make a copy of your server. But before you do any of that, if you want to make full utilization of that first general processing computer that you're given, in other words, one EC2 instance, one computer, one server, what you want to do is you want to schedule things, you want to allocate the resources on that computer well, so it's always being utilized, especially if it's the paying for it anyway model. If you're paying for just having the server running and not paying for your bursty utilization of different services, which is an option, they call that serverless. It's very interesting. But when you have a server, someone has to sysadmin it. Might as well be you. You can do some crazy stuff as the sysadmin on a single server. You are God on that server. You can make it do anything you want. You can schedule tasks. You can do all these crazy things. So many people use that for making a web service or a microservice where computers talk to each other over, request response model, HTTP, where there's some sort of web server listening. Here's a response. It sends back the reply. But there's those of us who know that scheduling is often necessary, and under Unix for a long time there's the System V, System 5, I guess it's from AT&T System 5 Release 4 where it comes from, but it's basically a bash file system for stopping and starting services, starting them in the first place, keeping them running at startup. Some people call it SysV, and some people call it the init system, and others know it as what lives under the directory /etc/init.d, and Apache users know you do /Apache space start, stop, or whatever. And there's really a bash script that's written out in Unix, in the bash dialog of Unix script, sitting in a directory with all this logic control that you can see and you can read, and it defines what it is to start a service, what it is to stop, and it's gone, it's not gone, but it's been replaced in large part by what's called systemd, SYSTEMD. That putting a lowercase d at the end of a short word is typically the way of telling Unix or Linux people that it runs like a daemon, silently in the background, the Linux equivalent of a Microsoft service. And that's where you get things started that you're scheduling, right? And you do it a new way now. You create these short config files, and the config files allow you to accommodate for whether it starts at startup, at what point in startup it starts, whether it should respawn if it's found not running, and what interval you want the daemon, the systemd, to check and make sure it's running. So fine, I can do systemd in a config file to get Python space file name.py to run. Job solved, right? Well, not really, because I want notifications if things go wrong. I'm going to be sending out emails. I need to do other levels of integration at that level in the control process where things are being scheduled and scripted. So instead of using its built-in scheduling system, I'm using systemd to start the schedule module under Python. So I have a myschedule.py file, which should be running all the time because it's a scheduling job. You would normally do Python space myschedule.py and just let that thing run forever. But if it stopped, it wouldn't be running anymore. So you start it under systemd. But if you merely did that, you would have to cram too much of the automation control into your myschedule.py. So I have it running through a general scheduler Python script, which instead of starting directly from systemd, I'm starting from circusd, which is the daemon part of the circus module for Python, which is the same thing as systemd, except you have to use systemd to start it. Once you've started it, it's got a Python API for checking what jobs are running, making sure things are it has its own respawning logic internally that you can control through Python commands. So now my scheduler, which previously under the bash system, I was just starting sequentially. It was under bash, under the system 5 init.d system. Previously, things happened sequentially. By switching to system D and circus D, things can happen sequentially. But under circus D, I'm starting my schedule.py, which imports the schedule module, which is where I really address concurrent jobs. So I talk the language of concurrency at the Python level, where I can see where I'm breaking off threads for new tasks, which I know are going to finish. And I can use file locks there at that point too, so I know they're not going to double run. I can have jobs that might run all day once they start and try to start every half hour. And once it starts, it goes as long as it takes to finish, and it can't double run. And as long as it doesn't go a full 48-hour cycle, windows will open for the next run, and generally speaking, as resources are available on the server, the script can run faster. Because it's running along side by side with other jobs, and I'm fitting the jobs together sort of like a Tetris way. Now, to find my way to Circus, I had to convince myself that System D itself wasn't enough. To find my way to the schedule module under Python, I had to convince myself that the sched built-in module wasn't enough. And then on the other extreme, I had to make sure that things like the Celery distributed task and job queue system was not in fact too much. Maybe I needed that. So I investigated on the high end, on the low end. I investigated minimal way an old school Unix sysadmin would do it. And I investigated the way, what is the current revolution? A web services entrepreneur app, whatever is going on today. Machine learning service, API companies. So as long as everything's in an API, you can knit together systems that, sort of sit and live in the middle, that only take on as much responsibility as you have the processing power and the local storage space to accommodate. So it's, once again, middleware. Middleware was such a term 10 years ago under the Java world, but middleware under Python, leveraging the cloud as the place to run your middleware, keeping it lightweight, doing things occasionally the old school sysadmin way to get the process booted, and then decoupling it from that, coupling it to a more modern, information system architecture for modern advantages. And I'll take the CSV files I'm dropping to the hard drive and put file name as the key in an Amazon S3 pair, and the data that was in the CSV file in a data bucket there, so I can go changing rows and columns however I like, and I'm not dealing with relational database ball and chains. Yes, my friends, the old SQL relational database, everything's deconstructed into table models, is not good when you're working fast and furious. When you're working fast and furious, you want to throw whatever you're sitting on somewhere that you can look it up quickly based on a reliable name you could derive again, such as date, service, property, URL, or whatever. Think in terms of compound primary keys or unique constraints from the SQL world, and you can have a pretty good idea of the key system in the NoSQL world, where the lookups against these keys is incredibly fast for a variety of reasons that traditional relational database people are well familiar with because of indexes. So indexes are built against the key, lookups are fast, and you can do a lot that's database-like with many fewer constraints when you do it with a NoSQL system like Amazon S3. So then how do you do your SQL-like stuff? I like me some, select star from table name where something equals something, limit 1,000, so I only get 1,000 rows because I'm asking for all columns. Using select star is just fine in some cases, especially where you're limiting the number of result sets. Maybe you want to see all the data in context that is stored. So don't let any, DB admin snob tell you that select star is bad practice. It's not if you use it with, top X number of rows under the Microsoft dialect, or limit X to X number of rows under the Postgres dialect. So anyway, I'm rambling on. SQL stays in the picture because you can pull all those CSVs out of their Amazon S3 buckets, throw them together as if they were one table under pandas. If you're going to do this with big data, you need a powerful local machine, and preferably a fast data connection to where your data is stored, a fast connection to pull from the Amazon S3 bucket. You join all these CSVs together as if you're stacking them vertically on top of each other, and bam, they're all data in the same table, and you can select against it with SQL, even though it never started out as tabular data, at least as far as optimized storage format, because that's the only difference between tabular data in RDBMS and tabular data stored as JSON embeds in the NoSQL world. Only difference is how they're optimized for fast lookups and parsed out for fast responses. Anyway, hopping on the train now. I re-architected my system using an interesting choice decisions I made thinking through the system. So thanks for joining me. Hope to talk to you soon, and don't forget to subscribe.